In a video I posted a few days ago, I described what would happen if every Yonko crew visited Wano to take part in the Onigashima raid, and since the idea was really great and I had fun covering it, I decided to do it for another arc. Yeah, I'm about to do it for Egghead. So strap in because I'm about to get real in depth with this video. But before I get into the video, if you guys don't enjoy content like this, you know what to do. Hit that like button and subscribe, as I do post content like this regularly, and to be honest, it's a win-win. You guys show me love and support, and I give it back to you in the form of videos. Whether it's One Piece, other anime, or just fiction in general, in due time I plan on covering it, so be there when I go there. But I feel like I've rambled on long enough, so I'll jump straight into the video and see what would happen if every Yonko crew went to Egghead. Now, as per usual, when it comes down to these what if scenarios, I'm going to have to go over the rules. Now, the first rule is that every Yonko crew will take part in this video, aside from the Straw Hats, as they were already in it and have already faced it. So, the second rule is that I'll be using the strongest iteration of every crew here, and the third and final rule is that they'll be going there for different reasons, but mainly since they were already out at sea anyway and just so happened to bump into the island. And so with that being said, why don't we jump into the what ifs. And so to begin the video, we're going to start with Cross Guild. Now, Cross Guild are going to stumble across Bonnie like the Straw Hats do, and they're going to free her, as they may as well. I mean, there's no downsides to doing it. And so what would happen is they will then have to be forced onto the island due to Lilith and the massive shark, and so they're forced onto Egghead. Once they're on Egghead, they meet Vegapunk, and Vegapunk basically tells them his situation, and they basically are like, well, we don't mind taking you as you are a pretty good asset. And Vegapunk's like, you know, listen, if you can take me off of this island, then I'll go with you. So Buggy says that's a great idea, and Crocodile and Mihawk are actually in for this. But what happens is Lucci appears and they hear about this, and instantly Crocodile goes out there to meet him and he bitches him instantly. And so they try to leave at this point, but Vegapunk and Bonnie get into something, and what happens in canon happens, forcing them to stay there for a little bit longer. Now, this is when they obviously find out that Bonnie is actually a child, and so I feel like Buggy would take a little bit of sympathy on her, and I feel like Mihawk and Crocodile, you can say that Crocodile is a little bit evil, but I don't think Crocodile's gonna be like, oh, I don't care about this child. But what comes along with this is the traitor plotline, and with the traitor plotline going on, what would then happen is they'll be forced onto the island a little bit longer, and once they find York and they find out what's going on, they're like, we might as well just stay the night. So what happens is they stay the night, and what has happened is, even though they face the Seraphim and whatnot, I'm here to tell you that Lucci and just the rest of the CP0, aside from Stussy, have been killed. Mihawk and Crocodile don't see a reason for them to be alive, so they get rid of them. And for the Seraphim, they see them as a plus, and they believe that if they can keep control of them, then they'll be a great asset to Cross Guild. So obviously during the night, York and everything else would happen with the Gorosei and Saturn, and I feel like Buggy would shout out here, and Crocodile and Mihawk would have to put him down. But either way, it's still going to happen the exact same as it does in canon, and so Kizaru enters the island after leaving with Sentomaru, and Mihawk is there to stop him. Now, what's going to happen is they're then going to enter in a fight, and Luffy in canon here was trying to figure out what Kizaru's motives were, so he was stalling for time. And whilst Mihawk is also stalling for time, Mihawk does not care about what Kizaru is trying to do, fighting way more seriously, and because he doesn't have the stamina issues that Luffy does, he's able to hold off Kizaru a lot better. But at this point, Sam would try to come on the island, but Cross Guild and the Vegapunks have already boarded the ship alongside the Seraphim, so it's just Mihawk has to come back, and so knocking him away, he then is at his wit's end, since, well, Kizaru just doesn't want to get up anymore. So he dashes back to the ship, and Buggy is laughing, but obviously Saturn appears at the ship, very pissed. But he then gets diced up, and I can see Crocodile then just draining him, and I feel like because Mihawk's Haki is meant to be extremely good, Saturn dies here, which means no Gorosei getting summoned here, and Kizaru is just laying somewhere on the island because he just doesn't want to fight anymore. So that means that Cross Guild get the W. So moving on, we have the Big Mom Pirates. And so in the beginning, they're going to meet Bonnie, and obviously they're going to save her because they see that it's a child, and Big Mom isn't just going to let a child drown. So that happens, but they're forced onto the island due to Lilith. And with that, they get on the island and meet the different Vegapunks, then going up to Vegapunk. But at the exact moment, you then have Lucci coming onto the island, and that's when they fight Lucci and the rest of CP0. And I'm sorry to say, but yeah, Lucci, he dies here because Big Mom doesn't see a reason for him to even be alive, so she kills him and the rest of the crew just get rid of the rest of CP0. Now, Vegapunk obviously has already said that, yeah, if you guys can obviously get me off this island, then I'll try to help you guys. And so yeah, that continues to go on until everything with Bonnie and Vegapunk happens, and Big Mom wouldn't actually intervene here. She'll just let it happen as she sees Bonnie as this little girl who kind of needs help, and she does know who her father is, as she's pointed out multiple times that Kuma is her father. This is going to be very interesting later, but I'm not going to say why. And so what would happen is, after this happens and basically everything with Vegapunk and Bonnie goes on, where Bonnie goes to see Kuma's paw, we then have the York and the traitor plotline. Now with the Seraphim, they are dealt with as Big Mom and the rest of the Big Mom Pirates are then going to corner them, and since Lucci and Kaku aren't here, it's not going to be that much of an issue. So what would then happen is everything will happen as it does in canon. They wait the night, speak to Saturn and whatnot, and so then Kizaru comes onto the island, and this is where they have to fight. Now, as this isn't one or Big Mom, I am allowed to use a hypothetical full power Big Mom. And so even though she may be slower than Kizaru, when she hits him, he feels it. And with him already being mentally conflicted, her fighting him and being so aggressive and continuing to power herself up, yeah, I can't lie. Kizaru at a certain point is just like, yeah, I'm just gonna lay here for a little bit. Now he's not completely defeated, no. It's just the fact that he just doesn't want to fight anymore, and Big Mom is giving him a massive reason as to not wanting to fight. So Saturn arrives onto the island, but Big Mom continues to wail on him. Now the severity of the situation would call for Saturn to summon the Gorosei, but Kuma appears and punches him, taking everybody by surprise. Now the reason he appears this time and not last time is because they gave him enough time to appear on the island, basically allowing him to then stop Saturn from summoning the Gorosei earlier than usual. As he has knocked Saturn extremely far, Big Mom would basically say that they need to leave, and so yeah, Big Mom would actually want to leave at this point as she's gotten everything she's wanted to get. She's got Vegapunk, who can help her out with many things, and she's also got Kuma. Now, I don't know if she's going to be able to coerce Kuma into doing anything for her, but listen, Bonnie's happy and she gets a Bakarir. That's a 2-for-1, so she then gets off at the island before the Gorosei can appear, and that's when the Big Mom Pirates take their leave, allowing them to gain the W. And so moving on, we have the Blackbeard Pirates, and just like everybody else, they meet Bonnie, and this is where it does get a little bit weird. Since they do have a history of Bonnie, Blackbeard or maybe even one of his crewmates will try something, but Kuzan is there and threatens them. He says if they even decide to even lay a hand on Bonnie in a weird way, they're all being frozen and that they understand the situation. So after that, they go onto the island due to Lilith and whatnot, and they meet Vegapunk. When they meet Vegapunk, this is where Blackbeard starts to celebrate. Why? Is because he's gonna tell Vegapunk that he is now his hostage, and to be honest, Vegapunk isn't really that upset by it. He'd rather be held as hostage instead of being killed. Now he doesn't know why he's being held hostage. He's just assuming that it's just a regular pirate thing. They're probably gonna ask for a ransom or something, or probably just gonna keep him to do something. But Vegapunk at this point doesn't really care. He'd rather just not give whatever he needs to give to the world government and be killed by them instead of just, you know, being there with pirates. So what would happen is he'd be on the island, but then CP0 would arrive. Now with CP0 there, Lafitte would say, oh yeah, they've arrived on the island, and he's obviously seen them. And so Kuzan says he'll deal with them, and he freezes them solid. The exact same thing with the Seraphim, and so all of the Seraphim are out of commission along with CP0, and Blackbeard says he's actually seen the Seraphim from Boa's island. Bonnie and Vegapunk get into their usual fight since everybody else is doing something, and that's when their little plotline goes on. But while that's all going on, they all realize that York isn't there. Now her plan is different this time. She'd run to call the Gorosei and say that the Blackbeard Pirates are there and that they have held Sella hostage. Now once they notice that she's missing, what would happen is Kizaru would merge with the island and find her. When he finds her, he drags her out and they basically ask her what she was doing. At this point, York just yells out, and this is where the Blackbeard Pirates are like, this could actually be the perfect opportunity to ship Vegapunk off. See, now instead, he can then do the deal right in front of the Gorosei's face, so he then knows that his kingdom is actually assured something. So he's like, yeah, you know what, it's fine, we'll just wait overnight, we'll wait for them to come. And so he does. And when they come, he then actually reveals what his plan is, and obviously the rest of his crew knew, but Vegapunk and especially York would be shocked. Now, York doesn't actually really mind his plan, but Vegapunk doesn't like it in the slightest. And so what would happen is Saturn would hear this and he gets mad, but he's like, let me calm down. And then he's like, you know what, we can actually do this deal, as he does believe that if he is able to then just get Vegapunk free of charge, he should then be able to just get rid of him, and he's not going to give Blackbeard his kingdom. Now, Blackbeard, fearing this, sends Lafitte out to see if the Marines are still getting prepared to then obviously destroy them, and, well, yeah, the Marines are still getting ready to destroy them, and Kizaru has already left. With Lafitte telling him this, what would happen is Blackbeard will get ready, but then Kuzan will be like, no, I will deal with this. And so, when Kizaru arrives on the island after defeating Sentomaru, Kuzan and Kizaru will then get into their fight. Now, with this going on, Blackbeard would tell Saturn that, listen, you're in a downhill fight. And so, what would happen is Saturn would then appear onto the island and then they get into a fight. And with Kizaru controlling the island, Saturn and Kizaru's fights are hell, as Kuzan and Blackbeard are going to be pushing them and they're not going to be able to retaliate as much, as everything is basically going to be fighting against them. With this being said, the Blackbeard Pirates will then tie up all the Vegapunks and take them to their ship. To be honest, I feel like at this point they probably may have already killed York, as they see her as more of a downside. And so, when they are now back on their ship, they then tell Blackbeard, but at this point, Saturn is getting stressed, and so he summons the Gorosei. But as he's about to do so, once again, Kumo comes in and punches the living hell out of him. But either way, after he recovers, what happens is the Gorosei are now summoned. Seeing this, Kizaru tells them that, yeah, everybody's off at the island, so Kuzan and Blackbeard need to get off. And because the Gorosei are trying to get to work instantly, he shifts the island against them. But what would happen is Noshjuro would then slice the island. This does damage to him, and so the Blackbeard Pirates know what needs to be done. So what they do is, because Blackbeard and Kuzan aren't there and Kizaru can just get out of the ground and just jump on the ship whenever he needs to, what Katarina Devon and Van Alga do is teleport around, and Katarina Devon decides to tap every single Gorosei member before grabbing Blackbeard and then grabbing Kuzan. When they're on the ship, the Gorosei try to fly towards the Blackbeard Pirates fleet, but Blackbeard will greet them with a smash that throws them all off. Kuzan will then follow this up with an Ice Age to then keep them in place momentarily, allowing them to leave. Now, even if they do try to follow them, and only a few of them could follow them, they're gonna continuously be smashed by Blackbeard paws, and Kuzan is then gonna let off some Ice Ages to then keep them in place for a little bit, and they're not gonna be able to just continuously chase them down. So, with that being said, that is a win for the Blackbeard Pirates. And so moving on, we have the Redhead Pirates, and they get Bonnie, and obviously they would head onto the island as Lilith will then intercept them. Now when they meet Vegapunk, they would then start to understand the situation, and Vegapunk would actually trust them with this, as there are no downsides, so they would just allow him to come with them. But what would then happen is Lucci would then appear, and the other Redhead Pirates would then deal with him. And so what's going on is Shanks wants to leave, but then what would happen is York and Bonnie stuff would go on. The trio with Plot 9 would start, and Bonnie would run into Vegapunk, and obviously they would have their little fight, and she would then see Kuma's paw. They hunt down York and they find out what happened with Bonnie, and so they decide to stay overnight because Shanks believes that he can use his leverage against the Gorosei to basically get off of this scot-free. But the Gorosei at this point don't care for Shanks, so they're like, alright, cool, if you want to stand against us, then we'll just continue to fight you. So Kizaru goes in and he is hard stopped by Shanks, and Shanks easily holds him back as his crew decides to leave. Now at this point, Saturn is going to arrive on the island, and Shanks would then hit Kizaru away, and at this point Kizaru's just gonna be like, you know, I'm just gonna firm here at this point and just stay down. And so rushing over to his crew, he would then see Saturn, and Shanks would dice him up instantly, killing him on the spot. Because, well, we know that Shanks is gonna be able to damage Saturn and possibly kill him. So yeah, with that being said, that is a W for the Redhead Pirates. And so moving on, we have the Beast Pirates. Now, I feel like there's going to be a little bit of a tug of war on if they should even save Bonnie, but let's just say they save Bonnie for some reason. But at the exact moment, obviously Lilith comes in and they're then forced onto the island. Now when they see Vegapunk, Kaido says that it's actually pretty good that they met because he needs him for Devil Fruits and Caesar has gone AWOL. Vegapunk says only if he saves him, and Kaido is like, I'm cool with that. Now as CP0 arrive onto the island, they are handled easily and they are killed on the spot, as I don't think the Beast Pirates would want to keep them around. Now with everybody distracted doing something, Bonnie and Vegapunk are going to get into something, and Kaido doesn't really care at this point, since when he finds out what's going on, he's just gonna be like, okay, well, I mean, that's not really my problem. But she just sort of tagging along, and Kaido does see some sort of potential in her, so he's like, you know what, maybe she can come with us, and maybe she may join us. Now right after this, what would happen is the York stuff would go on, and when they see the Seraphim, King would probably be shook to his core. Now I feel like this would actually start something between Vegapunk and King, but Kaido's going to tell him to relax and that they could actually be used for something good in the future, maybe if they did some different programming or something. But King is pretty shook, and he is very mad that they're using his DNA to create little super soldiers. That's just something he didn't want to see. But either way, with them finding York, they will then find out what York did, and at this point Kaido decides to stay on the island, as why run? We can have a battle of a lifetime here. I'm not running. So he tells the Gorosei that if they want Vegapunk, they have to come again. And so he waits the night, and flying in, Kizaru is then going to meet Kaido even before he gets to Sentomaru. Now, with their fight going on, they will then be able to fight. And so what would happen after a while, Saturn, just like in canon, is going to get bored or feel like it needs to speed up. So he'll come onto the island, and the Beast Pirates are already going to be fighting the Marines that have come onto the island. But at this point, what's going to happen is Saturn is going to arrive and then unleash his little paralyzing ability, which actually does paralyze a few of them. But what would happen at this point is Kuma would arrive unparalyzing them. This then allows him to begin boxing Saturn, and it's pretty much Saturn being thrown around until he calls the Gorosei. At this point, Kizaru's had enough, as Kaido continuously keeps hitting him, and he doesn't really feel like doing this mission anymore. So what does he do? He gives up. Literally. Like, he basically allows Kaido to land a Thunder Bagua and then pretends to be dead, or at least knocked out. And so Kaido's going to be feeling full of himself. And so what would he do? Is he rush over and fight the Gorosei, and the Gorosei are going to tear everything up until he gets there. And when they do begin fighting, basically what's going on is that Kaido is doing a lot of the work, but his subordinates can't keep up. So what would happen is Kaido would then be like, alright, let me unleash one big attack that draws all the Gorosei in. King is also like, yeah. And what they do is a very cool flaming Bagua / Imperial Wings attack, and they go in. Now what could happen here is that the Gorosei could either die here or be sent back, or they could live. Now this just depends on how you view how strong Kaido's advanced conquest haki is. If you believe it's on the level of Gabans to the point where it can then damage the Gorosei, then yeah, of course, this attack would then do enough damage to then do that to them. But if you believe it's not, then they'll then survive this, and yeah. So what would I say? I'd say that it's a 50-50. The entire scenario is based on how you view that. So what am I gonna do? I'm gonna say Kaido gets a half win, since I do think it's a massive possibility, but it's not confirmed. So I'm not gonna sit here and say that, yeah, no, Kaido can 100%. And so finally, we then have the Whitebeard Pirates. And what they do is when they see Bonnie, they instantly go and get her, since Whitebeard isn't gonna let a child drown. And so when they get Bonnie, they go onto the island due to Lilith and everything. And so when they find out he's about to die, they don't mind taking him. But as they were discussing things, Lucci and the rest of CP0 do arrive onto the island, and this is where they do actually get violated. They get absolutely bullied by the Whitebeard Pirates, and so they are then tied up but not killed. Now, with Bonnie and Vegapunk getting into an argument, Whitebeard is actually going to sit here and listen to it, as Bonnie keeps talking about Kuma, and he does know about the Kuma situation, but he's pretty interested to know what's going on, and basically tells Vegapunk to tell them what's going on. Now, Vegapunk is like, I was promised not to say anything, and so they continue their little scuffle until Bonnie finds the paw. Bonnie would then go and touch the paw, and everything would happen with that, and then at that point, Vegapunk's like, you know what, I might as well just tell you. And so he finds out everything, and Whitebeard would then console Bonnie on this, but right as this happens, the traitor plotline will then begin. Now, Whitebeard will then trust his crew to then deal with everything while he consoles Bonnie, and by the time that ends, they then realize that, okay, we can then wait a day and then face the Marines so we can then get out safely, or we can leave now and it's going to be a hell and it's going to be a little bit too complicated. So what they decide to do is they decide to stay on the island, and what they say is that, yeah, we're taking Vegapunk hostage and that you are facing the world's strongest man and his family. I don't think you want to fight us, but you know how the world government are going to be. And so with Kizaru rocking up onto the island, Oden will go instead of Whitebeard to go and entertain him, and their fight will be pretty fun, as he would keep Kizaru occupied as they get ready to leave. Now then, ready to leave, what would happen is they'll call out to him, and so Oden will then knock away Kizaru, which was actually a positive for Kizaru, as Kizaru uses this as the perfect opportunity to zip past him and go for Vegapunk. But as he's about to, Marco stops him and Oden attacks him from behind. Now with this, Saturn appears on the island, and then Whitebeard will intercept him. With everything going on here, the situation then becomes dire, and as Saturn is about to summon the Gorosei, Kuma pops in and smashes Saturn away. Whitebeard will be pretty shocked by this, but he's actually kind of happy, as he does know everything that went on between him and Bonnie. And so, with that being said, Whitebeard decides to do one last thing before Saturn can get up, and as the Whitebeard Pirates basically throw Kizaru back onto the island, Whitebeard decides to smash it into pieces, letting his full power, or a bit of his full power, come out, with him then destroying Egghead, allowing them to leave, allowing Bonnie to be happy with Kuma, and the Whitebeard Pirates being able to reunite a family, making them happy. And so that is a W for the Whitebeard Pirates. And so with that being said, that's the end of the video. Now, people that may be wondering why Kaido could possibly damage them but Mihawk could, well, Shanks. He fought Shanks. Shanks was a Holy Knight, or a part of a Holy Knight at least for a bit, so he knows that weaknesses had to be that strong Haki wise, so yeah. Anyway, I love you all. I shall see you guys in the next video. Goodbye.